Like serials, and certainly so was George Lucas. So when, it's an old story, but maybe it just bears repeating a little bit, that I was in Hawaii with George because he was terrified of the opening of Star Wars, and he called me and said, "You want to go to Hawaii with me? And we'll sit there and just build a lucky sandcastle," because, Star Wars was about to open. This was in May of 1977. And it opened. It was a huge success. And in those days, you knew it was going to be a success when all the 10 a.m. shows were sold out. And they were across the entire nation. And George came back more relieved than I had ever seen him, and started planning his next opus. And he sprung this concept that he had had on me called Raiders of the Lost Ark, about this intrepid sort of gravedigger archaeologist going after somewhat like paranormal antiquities from all over the world. And he didn't outline the story because we didn't really have the story, but he had the genre, he had the idea, and he had the homage it would pay to all of the Republic serials. So right away I was intrigued, and I really was excited, and we made a deal right there on the beach to do this movie.
That's great. You described, just at Comic-Con when I saw you last, you described George, you said, my friend, no, I should say my best friend. You made a point to call him that. As a fan of film, that's a fascinating sentence to think about the friendship between you two. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, do you text each other? Or do you sit around?
George doesn't do text or email ever. I've never received a text or an email from George, and he's never received one from me. He's a phoner, it's all the telephone, or it's in person. So it's either eyes on or it's a telephone call, but it's never texting.
What's the sort of the texture of your conversations? I mean, do you guys talk a lot about film, or do you find yourself talking about other things?
No, I get a phone call, and this is right here.
Hey, Steve. What are you doing?
So I'm sort of sitting around working, George. I'm making 10 pictures a year as a producer. What are you doing?
No, I don't know.
Working on this Blu-ray.
I mean, he always has something going, but it's funny. We talk for, the thing with George, when George and I get on the telephone, I have to clear my morning or my afternoon because we talk for a long, long time. The only person I've ever talked to at the length I talked to George, believe it or not, is Stanley Kubrick, when we were friends in the 80s. But George, and we talk about everything. We talk about movies, and we talk about his projects and my projects. We talk about our families and our friendship, and it's been an enduring friendship. I met George when he premiered THX at the Royce Hall UCLA USC Film Festival in 1967, I think it was. So we've known each other for a long time.
Do you ever talk about another Indiana Jones movie?
One person wants to see another movie. The only person in the audience.
And that was Shia. No,
I think that was the only bridge we didn't burn because of Indy 4. Thank you. We talk about it, yes, and we're hopeful someday.
There's so many things that you put on the screen in this film and the other indie films that we all love. There's one scene that it really, for some reason, just resonates, I think, with fans so much. It's the swordsman scene. I've heard so many different versions of how that scene got into this movie. Could you clarify for us exactly how that happened?
Okay, well, the truth is that the morning we were supposed to shoot this 3-page-long sword versus whip fight between the swordsman and Indy. And Harrison came to me in the morning. He said, he always calls me pal. He said, "Listen, pal." He said, I went into like Senor Barfi's, and I had something that didn't agree with me last night, and you've got about an hour with me, and then I'm going back to the hotel because I'm really sick. So what do you want to do? And I think I said, well, we have 3 pages to shoot, but if you pull out your gun and kill the swordsman, you can go back to the hotel.
No, that's rubbish.
Please tell Harrison Ford.
chosen to eat native food, unlike Stephen, who went to Tunisia with a steamer trunk full of SpaghettiOs. And I had suffered mightily for that. And I was no longer capable of staying out of my trailer for more than it took to expose a roll of film, which was 10 minutes. And then I would have to flee back there for sanitary facilities. And it was really horrible. And we had rehearsed the night before what was to be a 3-day scene. And there was a certain logic to my plea the next morning. It was about a 45-minute to an hour drive from our hotel to the set, and during that period of time, it came to me that there might be a way out of this. It came out of the logic, a kind of interest in the film. We had just shot a lengthy scene in which there was a duel between bad guys with swords and things, bad guys, and the whip. And we were about to shoot another scene that would take us at least 3 days to shoot. The sad thing is that the guy who was playing the Black Swordsman had won the part. Probably the greatest contest for the part, any part in the film, was over this, because both Stephen and George were convinced that you could throw a salami in the air and slice it into wafer-thin slices. But this guy had trained and trained and trained, and we had to tell him that he was going to die. But my logic was that we really didn't want to see another, and we were going to, big, long, extended scene. We wanted to get to Miriam, who was captured. So I said, hey, pal, why don't we just shoot this son of a bitch? And Stephen said, he said, I was just thinking of that. That's all there is to it. But the poor guy, when the news was broken to him that he was not going to get a chance to show any of the skills that he'd spent the last 3 months acquiring with the sword.
Yeah, but he became the most famous swordsman ever to die by Amy's gun in the history of the series. So.
But the first time I shot him, it took about 3 weeks for him to die. Terrible. Because he didn't want to be robbed of the drama. That was his due. So he did a very elaborate death scene. And,
first he dropped the sword, then he stumbled backwards, then he came forward again, and he started to weave, then he went down on one knee, then the second knee, and then he stood there on his knees and then went face down. That was take one.
And then I said to Stephen, watch this. And Stephen said, speed. And before he had a chance to say action, I pulled the trigger. And he went, and fell down. And that's what's in the movie.
So Tunisia was a rough time for you guys, huh?
It was
Not
hot.
for you, for SpaghettiOs, you were hot.
No, I never got sick there because I got the Sainsbury canned food, SpaghettiOs, pork and beans, whatever they had from Sainsbury's in England. I just packed a steamer trunk of canned food because I had heard that you could get a little bit of indigestion there if you didn't take care of yourself. So Doug Slocum, the DP, and I were the only ones that didn't get sick over a 6-week shooting period.
Speaking of Dougie, I mean, there's so many people that go into making a film like this into what it finally is. Talk a little bit about his contribution and just also working with him, what that meant for you.
Well, Dougie now, he's still with us. Dougie's, I think, 101.
98.
98, you see, oh, great, 98. And he'll probably get over 100 years old. And Dougie was older then, and I had really loved Dougie's work in a number of movies he made. One, the movie Julia. I loved his work in that, and he was just a supreme cameraman. And what I liked about him was he wasn't afraid to use fill light. And I wanted this movie to look like an old-fashioned Hollywood Saturday matinee movie, which meant instead of having a lot of abstract, noirish lighting where it's really bright on one side, really dark on the other, I wanted the faces to be seen. And yet I didn't want somebody to flat light the movie. I wanted somebody to know how to give it an elegant style. Let me see the faces, but also use the sun, use backlight, make it look nice so the characters stand out from the backgrounds. And Dougie already came to the party with that style. And he was known for that, and I kind of cast him for that reason. And Dougie was amazing. I mean, if I wanted to put the camera up on a mountain, or a small mountain, and I said, let's get the camera up there, I'd turn around, and 10 minutes later, Dougie was halfway up the mountain already, ahead of the cameraman, ahead of the dolly grip, ahead of the focus puller, ahead of everybody. And he was just this sort of very rugged and yet funny individual. He told me a story one day, and this is sort of the quintessential Dougie Slocum, but he said he had a few pints in the local pub one night, and he had divorced his first wife, or she had divorced him about 20 years before, and he had pulled into his pocket. He got home, he was a little tipsy, he got home and he took his keys out of his pocket and he searched for the right key, and he found the key, put it in the lock, and it wouldn't go. He went for the second key and it worked, and he opened the door and he went upstairs, and there was his wife of 20 years ago in bed with her husband of 20 years, and he got into the wrong house. And that was just Dougie. That was just Dougie. He was the absent-minded cameraman, the genius absent-minded director of photography.
Dougie never used a light meter. Remember, he used to read the density of the shadow by the shadow of his thumb against his palm, and he would give a light reading to the cameraman through that method.
And he also stuttered. And it was kind of a beautiful stutter because his gaffer's name was Martin, and of course it was harder for him to pronounce Martin. So we would stand around where he would try to pronounce Martin's name for a while. The M was difficult for him, and then it would always be Martin. And I won't parody it. I won't do that. But he would say Martin 11:5, and he was always right. Or he'd look around and he'd say, Martin, 5'6", and then we move out of the shadow, 8'11", and he was just spot on. I'd never worked with a DP before or since that didn't use a light meter.
Yeah, Harrison, for you, the first time that you encountered the words Indiana Jones on a page, did you know right away it was a role that you were interested in? Did it present itself to you right away that this was something you wanted to pursue?
I got a call from George Lucas saying that he wanted me to meet Steven Spielberg, and that he was sending a script over to the house for me to read in preparation of that. And I read the script, and I thought it was incredible opportunity, and about 2 hours later I was at Stephen's house talking about it. And of course it was because what's his name had Tom, is that what he called himself?
Tom, yeah.
Tom had to drop out. Tom Selleck had to drop out because of an overlying commitment to do Magnum PI. So I hadn't heard the words, the name Indiana Jones until about 4 hours before I had the part.
True. And what happened was, after Tom was preempted because of his commitment to CBS from Magnum PI, George coincidentally asked me to see a cut of Empire Strikes Back. And so I walked in to watch a rough cut of Empire Strikes Back up in Northern California. And when the movie was over, I just walked over to George and I said, we have our Indiana Jones. He said, who? And I said, that guy, Han Solo. That's Indiana Jones. And then George said, well, Yeah, he's a great actor, but he's identified with this character now, in Star Wars. And I said, yes, but he's an actor. They're supposed to be identified with other characters as well. And George had never thought about Harrison in that same context. But he immediately, at that point, he said, yeah, I think it'll be great. He really just, at that point, he threw in and said, yeah, it'll be great. And then he called Harrison a couple days later.
Harrison, this is the most persistent role of your career. I mean, you've returned to this, 4 times now, and potentially a 5th, I suppose. What's the... Talk a little bit about that. What's the great part of that, and what's the part?
Maybe a 5th, but I ain't going to Mars.
No, I ain't going to Mars with you.
Sorry, what was the question?
No, you keep going. That's better. Warlord of Mars. Go with it. No, just that's got to be a mixed bag. I mean, as an actor, I mean, you love losing yourself in new roles. And new
No,
genres.
there's no mix in that bag. It's an absolute delight to revisit this character. I have a chance to work with Stephen again, who only hires me for Indiana Jones.
What about E.T.?
No way.
But I'm an actor, you know?
Corrective. I hope I don't embarrass you.
I have to wait for Tom Hanks to take it serious.
No.
It's all right.
Do you know who I offered Jurassic Park to? This guy.
Yeah.
Alan Grant, first offer to Harrison.
Yeah, well, anyway, that was a lot like going to Mars. Well, anyway,
I think what really scared Harrison was I had the art department, and I still have the painting. I drew a painting of the character of Alan Grant with a kid, Lex and Timmy in each hand, running toward camera and a huge T-Rex chasing after him, and I told him to put Harrison's face on the character. I think that might have done the trick.
T-Rex? Or...
No, the character, Alan Grant.
Anytime there's next time we get a script for Indiana Jones, I'd be delighted to play the character again. The thing that we all both had as an ambition for the character in the series was that each time we meet Indiana Jones, we have the occasion to go to a new Indiana Jones film. We wanted to advance the audience's understanding of and experience with the character, not just by putting him in new adventures, but learning something new about him, something about what made him what he is, and that led to meeting his father in the person of Sean Connery, and meeting his son in the person of Shia, and bringing back Karen, and all of those things, which are, to me, what makes the character so interesting to revisit.
Absolutely. Stephen, you obviously have a lot of movies coming up. You have 2 movies in December scheduled for release. Tintin, I think one of your stars is here, right? Isn't Simon here? Simon Pegg? Yeah. Simon Pegg.
Where's Simon Pegg? Where's Simon?
You have...
No, wait, I forgot. Were you the Thompson with the P or without the P? All right, and Nick Frost is the other one, right, okay.
And then you also have Warhorse, which is very popular among us. Raiders has a link to Tintin in a way. Tell us a little bit about that. I'm sort of interested in that. You hadn't really heard of Tintin until Raiders was released, is that right?
I hadn't heard of Tintin at all. We were, when Raiders came out, my assistant came over to me and said, there's an interesting review in one of the, or 2, maybe even 3 of the French newspapers, and they kept referring to Indiana Jones in reference to Tintin. I didn't speak French, but I got hold of she sent me the newspaper, I looked at it, and the review kept saying Indiana Jones, spelled out, of course, in English, and then this thing, Tintin, all over the place. and I didn't understand what it meant, and I had the review translated, and they were basically saying that Indiana Jones owed a lot, Raiders of the Lost Ark owed a lot to Hergé's Tintin. And so I got a hold of the book, which was not easy to get hold of in, 1981 in the United States. But I got hold of the book, and I read the book, and I could see that there was a lot of similarities, a lot of links between both, adventure stories, especially the globe-trotting aspect. But I thought it was different enough that they could both coexist in the same world at the same time, so I tried to get the rights to Tintin back in 1983 when I was directing Harrison in London, on Temple of Doom. And I had a chance to talk to Hergé on the telephone, and he invited me to Belgium to meet him and talk about making a movie of his work. And sadly, he died a few weeks later, but I was invited back about a month later, and I met Fanny, his wife. And we eventually, so this movie's been almost 30 years also on the planning stages.
And then Harrison's, the first film, it ages so well. One of the things that people say about it is that the adventure seems so pure, the action is so exciting. This was before digital filmmaking. Talk a little bit about sort of the making of it. Was it a particularly grueling shoot for you? And when you see it now, what's it like to watch yourself kind of running through the paces?
It was, we had a wonderful stunt arranger named Vic Armstrong, who doubled for me in a lot of the more complicated things, and also doubled in the truck scene by Terry Leonard. And Vic used to look so much like me that my wife at the time would go up and tap him on the shoulder, and thinking it was me. And but it was arduous. But I was young and dumb and really enjoyed it. But I think the thing about the action, I think that was original is that we had the notion to show Indiana Jones's fear in a way that hadn't been often expressed before. And so we had an opportunity to complicate that a bit with character, and I thought that was interesting. But it was fun to do. It was arduous, and it became more arduous as the years went on. And I don't think I ever made it through one of the movies without a major injury. Shut down I was run over by the flying wing in this one, and tore an ACL in the middle of Tunisia. And the second one, I shut the whole movie down for about a month and a half while I had my back operated on.
And I used Vic Armstrong in all those shots. While you were away, Vic actually came in. We shot the entire fight between Pat Roach in that huge cauldron set with the big cauldron of water, and we shot 3 weeks without Harrison. And then when Harrison came back from his injury,
Did a lot of the
did all the coverage
love
on
scenes
Harrison
without me. Yeah.
You do see fear in Indy's eyes, and he has a touch of scoundrel to him. Those are things that we don't always see in films like this. Was that something that you knew right away that was a compass point going in, or did that develop?
No, that was Harrison's contribution. Harrison approached the whole character was something I wasn't going to do with the movie, and that was let this hero be afraid. I thought he was going to be a great movie idol, a great movie hero with many, many iconic possibilities for movie moments. Harrison said, if you want the audience to believe I'm real and not just some guy with a cape, you better let me show that I'm afraid. I'll recover from it, okay, but I need to show that fear. And Harrison brought that entire tapestry to the entire part, and that transformed the movie for me.
Would you, you mentioned George, obviously, Star Wars is coming out on Blu-ray, and he's gone back and he's changed some stuff, and it's caused kind of a hubbub with some people. Anyone? I'm curious, as a filmmaker, just your thoughts on your own work. Do you ever feel the temptation to go in and change things, or do you see it as sort of a finished document?
It's a little hot topic, isn't it? Let me put it this way. George does what he does because there's only one George Lucas, and thank God for that. He's the greatest person I've ever worked with as a filmmaker collaborator, and he's a conceptual genius, and he puts together these amazing stories, and he's great at what he does. And my feeling is he can do anything he wants with his movies because they're his movies, and we wouldn't have been raised with Star Wars or Indiana Jones had it not been for George. So what he does with his films is great. Now, speaking for myself, I tried this once, and I lived to regret it. And not because of fan outrage, but simply because I was a little disappointed in myself. But I got very, very kind of overly sensitive to some of the criticism E.T. had gotten from parent groups when it was first released in '82, having to do with Elliot saying penis breath, or the guns, with the FBI or the CIA or whoever the plainclothes people were, and also there were certain Carlo Rambaldi brilliant but kind of rough around the edges close-ups of ET that I'd always thought, well, if the technology ever evolves to the point that I can do some facial enhancements on ET, I'd like to. So I did an ET pass for like the third release of the movie. And it was okay for a while, and then I realized that what I had done was I had robbed the people who loved E.T. of their memories of E.T., and I had done that. And my only contrition that I could possibly do, because I felt bad about that, the only contrition that I really performed was when E.T. came out on DVD for the first time. I asked Universal, didn't ask Universal, I said, you're going to do this, or we're not going to release this on DVD. You have to come out for the same price of one DVD. You have to put two movies in the box, and one movie will be the 1982 version, and the other version will be the digitally enhanced version. So you got that. And what I'd like to ask is this. I'm going to do a little poll here, because I know we're coming out with the Blu-ray of E.T. If I came out with just one E.T. on Blu-ray, 1982, would anybody object to that? No! Okay, then so be it.
How about we should do a 30th anniversary screen of E.T. next year. Harrison, the last time I saw you, we were out in the desert and you were making Cowboys and Aliens. And one of David Lindelof? Woo! One of the things that you said when we were talking out there is that you felt like the sort of digital age of filmmaking, when you looked around at some of the movies that you saw coming out, you felt like they didn't quite have the soul that they always used to have, and you felt like science fiction, some of the films that you had seen other people making, didn't really sort of speak to you on a human level?
Well, I think what I was struggling to talk about probably was that the potential that filmmakers have with computer-aided graphics is it's wonderful and can be wonderfully creative, but it can also lead to a failure to attend to human scale, to go so far beyond our experience and our imaginations as an audience, to remind us that we're watching a digital effect, rather than some subtle extension of our experience, which makes us feel like it's humanly possible. And this leads to a vast field of computer created enemies, which, as far as the eye can see, and beyond. And they're up against one or two humans, and this kind of potential, I think, often robs movies of a degree of soul.
However,
But that's just me.
no, I think it's a tool. The digital tools available to all of us is simply that. It's just a tool. And we could either make a movie that celebrates the digital era, where we throw away story and just do a bunch of crazy, wonderful special effects that keep us entertained but don't give us anything to remember beyond, the fact we spent 2 hours watching all of these expensive effects. Or we can continue to, write good stories, original stories, real strong narratives, where the digital components are simply going to, if not enhance the experience, another way to have an experience. I couldn't have made Jurassic Park that anybody would have believed in this, even back in 1993, you wouldn't have believed that movie if the dinosaurs had been stop motion animation, claymation. You wouldn't have believed it. So that's where a digital tool, and that was the first movie ever to use digital technology to create an entire character. Matter of fact, a whole bunch of characters in the animals. So there's a time and place for it. In The Abyss, that digital tool where Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, her face is on the end of that water snake, that water tendril was awesome, was phenomenal. We had never seen anything like that before. And that stands out when it's used, because the story needs it to be used at that exact moment. It's when everything is just a special effect that we start to lose our way.
Taking that a little further, I remember reading something that you said about a year ago or maybe a little less, that the technology that you're using on Tintin makes you feel more like a painter than ever. And I was very intrigued by that when I read it. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, what about this film and the filmmaking process on Tintin is making you feel like a painter?
Well, it's only because I could do it over and over again until I liked it, until I could get it right. Usually on a live action movie, we do a shot, and the shot gets cut in with other shots, and it tells a story, and a scene evolves, and you look at it, and it makes you laugh, or makes you think, or it makes you get excited. But in this case, we could do the same thing, but we could perfect it. We could actually bring it to a kind of a point of tremendous satisfaction without any extra cost, because that's all part of the, I guess, the line item pricing of these shots. And you get it where it's right. And so I had a chance to affect color, and I was able to help light the movie. I certainly collaborate with all my live action films, with all my DPs, but on this one I really got to light the picture, and I got to decide what time of day or night the scene took place in, and it really was able to, I did it quietly and privately. I didn't have 200 people around me waiting for me to make a decision. I could do it just with a couple of animators on a polycom between New Zealand and Los Angeles. And it was a very intimate experience, I found.
We're going to take some questions, I think, from Twitter. We have been taking questions with #Raiders30. Hello. Here's the Twitter girl. He's a director.
Who won the Republican debate, the CNN Republican debate? Okay, you can have that one.
Michelle Bachmann, really?
This is from Brett Deacon. What kind of cover this? When will Raiders come out on Blu-ray? Do we know when Raiders will come out?
We don't know. I mean, soon, but we don't know when soon is.
How soon is now?
Well, soon in my world would be in about 6 months. Soon in George's world is later than 6 months, but probably, I don't know, because he's coming out with the Star Wars first. And then after that, he's going to position Raiders. We're just not sure whether it's going to be Raiders, Temple of Doom, and Last Crusade 1, 2, 3 separately, or whether they're all three going to be together. They haven't decided yet.
Terrific. And this is a question from Wayne Dog. It says so right on the paper. I can't make that up. What is harder and what is easier about making movies now compared to 30 years ago? Mr. Ford?
Well, there have been a lot of changes in the business, and it's maybe the hardest thing is that I was very lucky to come up at the very heyday of the movie business. A very lucky time when more people went to the movies than ever. When show business was a good business to be in, that's less the case now. It's hard to see a film that might find an audience and be a success 10 years ago go down the drain now because that the audience is so fragmented and because the business climate is so tough. And so I think there's less chances being taken in some cases. There's less diversity in the movie product than I wish there was.
Stephen, the 70s were just such an exceptional decade for cinema of all kinds. The sort of edgy and films aimed at mature audiences. When you look around at film today, how optimistic are you as a film fan when you see what Hollywood puts out now? Are you pretty pleased, or?
Well, I look at today as being much more diverse than ever before in history. There's more independent films being made now than ever before. Young filmmakers, older filmmakers, artists coming out of different mediums are able to make pictures. They're able to make YouTube movies. They're able to make movies for limited release on shoestring budgets. And they have film festivals, and they have small kind of niche, studios that are willing to distribute these pictures. So there's much more of a vocal presence, and there's a tremendous variety of different kinds of movies being made today. By the same token, when I was making pictures in the 70s and 80s, the directors made all the decisions about the genres and what films they wanted to make. Today it seems the studios are in control of the genres and what kind of films they want to make, and they go out and they hire the directors they think would be appropriate. It's much more in that sense of back in the 80s, 70s, the big studios relied on filmmakers to have all the answers. And today, the big studios, I think, presume to have all the answers. I'm not sure since I'm mini studio right now, I don't presume to have all the answers, but I know what it feels like to think that maybe once in a while I do. And it sort of undercuts the filmmakers that you really depend on to bring good stories to you. But I think this is always going to be a writer, director, initiated medium, and it's always going to be carried home by the actors.
That's what I meant.
This is a question from Coco. Who could make this stuff up, right? What are you most excited about?
Well, I'm most excited about talking to Harrison. We haven't done this before. This is great sitting talking about. We've never talked about the movie, this movie, in front of people before. This is the first for me, so that would be my answer.
Well, I guess you kind of have to say the same thing now, don't you?
Yeah.
This is from Todd. Just realized there's an Indiana Jones up there. Did you see that? This is from Todd. This is him speaking. I think Raiders is as close to perfect as a movie can get. Is there anything in it you wish you could change? You kind of covered that a little bit, but is there anything in this movie that you regret?
No, nothing. This is, of all the movies I've ever made, this is maybe the only movie that I could actually bear watching from beginning to end. And watch it like an audience, not watch it like someone who knows what's coming next. And I actually get lost watching Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I also get lost a little bit watching Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Those are my two favorite of the four movies. And I can't say that about every other movie I've made, but this movie is very special to me in that way.
You said in the past too that this was the movie that you had the least amount of, not preparation, but it was the least calculated or processed somehow, right?
Yeah, well, there was no, the process was, yes, I was coming off of an extravaganza called 1941. I shot 178 days of shooting. That's the longest I've ever shot a movie. Longer than Jaws, which was like 155 days, really a long picture. And I made everything up on 1941 as I went along. I didn't have storyboards. I had some storyboards, but not very many. And it was an out-of-control runaway production, completely because of me. And George and I sat down, and George actually gave me a really good sort of big brother lecture to me. And he basically said, I know you can do it. Go back to your TV movie days when you made Duel in 11 days. Go back to those days, and I'll bet you anything, you need this movie Raiders to bring you back to a kind of responsible form. And he was right. He was really right. So I storyboarded the hell out of this picture. I storyboarded every scene. I storyboarded scenes where it was just two heads talking to each other that had nothing else going on. And we made a documentary on the making of this movie, a 16-millimeter documentary. And there's a scene which is so typical of Harrison's relationship with me during the whole shoot. But I'm so excited every morning to show Harrison the storyboards and walk him through his day. And I'm sitting there with my big book open with the storyboards. And I'm explaining what's going to happen next, and we're doing this. And Harrison said, excuse me, and he gets up and he walks away. And I'm just sitting there with my storyboard book, and he doesn't come back. So, he didn't always listen, but I had the storyboards. So we made the movie 14 days ahead of schedule because of those damn storyboards.
Steve was very fast, very fluid. It was effortless to make the film. And he was wonderfully open and collaborative and generous. And it was really a fantastic experience.
I feel the same way about you. It was great.
Well, guys, they tell me that it is time, so I want to, as a film fan, thank you both so much for coming out and doing this. Ladies and gentlemen,